back at it with a recap and discussion of Season 2, Episode 5 of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan, What Happens in the Catskills. It's bright and early, Kanan is still in bed sleeping, and, RAQ is sitting on the edge of his bed watching him sleep. I feel like, not to say that RAQ doesn't love Kanan, but you could see, when he was younger and stuff, she cared about him, but maybe because he's getting older and starting to slip away, you notice in these last few episodes that she's really trying to hold on to him more firmly, in a way that she wasn't necessarily holding on to him when he was younger. This season, especially, she's been trying to keep very close tabs on him, wants to know where he is, what he's doing at all times. She's constantly checking in with Jukebox, do you know where he is? What's he doing? Where's he going? I guess it kind of points back to a few episodes, like the first episode, actually, when she was telling him that she kind of regrets that he's growing up, right? He's becoming his own person and starting to live his life independent of her. In a way, I guess it's something that happens to parents, but it also kind of points to her controlling nature, that he's getting older and as a result, she's trying to more firmly hold on to him. So you see her here, right? This creepo thing of sitting there watching him sleep. It's it kind of catches Kanan off guard. I think for most other people, if you woke up and RAQ was sitting on the edge of your bed, you'd be terrified. But it's she doesn't mean him any harm, but it's this thing of, I guess, trying to reconnect with him, of trying to hold on to him. And so she tells him that, apparently High Post had taken the two of them camping, which RAQ doesn't seem like she would like camping, right? I don't think I would like camping. But anyway, she's decided to take Kanan camping, not because it's something she's interested in, but apparently he had a really good time when High Post took them. And so it's a way for them to bond and reconnect. I've always said that RAQ, Lou, and Marvin living so close to where they hustle, in the same neighborhood, is a bad thing. Looking back over the show to last season, you see, drama at RAQ's house where Unique's boys shot up her house after the killing of, Buck 20. Warrell and crew shot up Lou's house and lit it on fire. And so we see some Italians are staking out RAQ's house, right? They're parked out in the street. You might be looking left, looking right when you're out and about in the street, but when you're at home, you feel safer, right? You might let your guard down and not be as vigilant. So here we see it that these two guys are parked outside looking at what's going on. We see them sitting and watching as Marvin pulls up, having just, removed the building inspector guy's body from the Baisley apartment. More on that in a moment. And so it's at this point, the Italians pose a physical threat as far as them maybe trying to kill someone or something like that. But for him to be moving the body on that particular day could also be additional drama for him as well, right? So I figured from last episode that Kanan was still trying to figure out the situation with Howard as far as what he believed, whether or not he thought it was the truth. He still sounded a little bit undecided, but kind of taking a cue from Jukebox, part of why he went to go see Howard was to look him in his eyes. And much as Juke said that despite the time apart from her mother and not really knowing her, in looking into her eyes, there was some familiarity there, some recognition. And so they have this tie even though they haven't been around each other. And Kanan explains that to Jukebox is that he felt much the same in speaking to Howard. I didn't pick up on it last episode or in the previous episodes that Jukebox isn't really buying that Howard is Kanan's dad, right? She's bought into RAQ's idea or explanation, whether it's just as a matter of being most expedient to tell Kanan that, or she's really not buying his story. We'll see how it works out. Kanan is procrastinating about getting ready because it's going to be just him and his mom. And given the discomfort between them right now, the lack of trust on his part towards her, he has some apprehensions about her, right? He's not really looking forward to it just being the two of them together. So he asks Jukebox why she isn't coming, and, as he wants someone there to function as an intermediary, as a buffer. But RAQ has made it clear that it's just going to be the two of them. So Marvin arrives in some boxy old man rental car, which caught my attention because it's not his style, nor does it seem to be RAQ's. This, is the car that RAQ's going to be driving upstate, but it looks like something a mob guy or your grandfather might drive. RAQ, meanwhile, has a Range Rover meant for off-roading, but explains to Kanan she's taking this grandpa mobile because she doesn't want to get her ride dirty. On the surface, that sounds like RAQ, right? Because I don't buy RAQ camping or anything like that. And here we see it that, Marvin explains to her once Kanan gets in the car, like he tells Kanan not to put anything in the trunk, right? To put his stuff in the back seat. And there's some back and forth between the two of them, right? But from that exchange, I assumed that the body of the inspector was in the trunk. So at this point, RAQ apparently does know about the building inspector being in the wall, right? And she does know that his body is now in the car. Like, Marvin's like sprayed him up with Lysol and air freshener, stuck some of those little pine tree things on him. We see in the previews that RAQ and Kanan are burying someone, and there's a lot of speculation about who it would be, and so, here we see that it's the building inspector, right? That the trip in part is about bonding with Kanan, but they're also going to bury the building inspector. So with that in mind, it goes back to this thing of RAQ, like not really thinking straight and trying to rebuild a relationship with Kanan, right? Why would you add this on to such a trip? Like this is something that her and Marvin or her and Lou, really maybe the three of you should be doing, not something for you to bring Kanan along to. Fine, go with him to the Catskills, spend time with him and whatnot, but don't use this. This is not an opportunity. Like your son should not be involved in the disposal of bodies, right? That's not a thing, or at least it shouldn't be. So during the drive, we see that RAQ is making an effort to talk to Kanan, like just to make conversation, and he's really not having it, or as much as possible. Without being rude, he's not talking to her. So she asks him about Davina, inquires if he's talking to anyone else. He kind of initially tries to brush it off, but mentions someone in passing that, the young lady he met at Famous's party, he's talking to her, which, RAQ is fine with him dating and whatnot, but explains that with him being young, it shouldn't be anything serious, right? She's looking over at him. She's trying hard to make some kind of conversation with him, but it's really not happening, right? He doesn't really want to talk to her about their problems or their tension between them, which is like, how are you going to resolve this, right? If you don't tell her what's going on. And so it's this thing that you have between RAQ and Kanan. You also have it between Jukebox and Kanan, and then also with Howard and Kanan, right? The two men sound like they're now in situations or have some kind of contact with a woman in this case that can possibly help to offer some guidance for rebuilding or building relationships with their children, overcoming wrongs that they've done in the past, helping them move past that and repair their relationships with their children. RAQ as a female, she kind of had Symphony in her life where it was like the reverse, right? Like he was that person for her. Here's someone that could have offered some sort of assistance and support, especially at a time like this, to rebuild her relationship with Kanan, but she seemingly pushed him away. Whereas the other two male parents in the show, through like different relationships and situations, they now have these women in their lives that they can possibly go to for advice and guidance for managing their relationships with their kids. Even when she had Symphony and Symphony would kind of offer pointers and things like that, she would often just like shut it down, right? Even here in this season, we saw when her and Kanan met up with him in the first episode, she shut him down with that as well, right? This thing of, I know my child, I don't need anybody to tell me about him, I know what's going on. And as time goes on, you realize that no, that's not really the case here. She needs a bit of help with Kanan because she's messing up royally with this kid. Symphony, Howard, and her relative in Virginia, 3 different people told her, like, listen, you might want to handle things with Kanan a little bit different. Like, he's not really for this street life. But there's this insistence that she knows what's best for him, that as his mother, she's best qualified to know how to handle him, to know, like, she's raising him. And it's an insecurity, right? Going back to the first season, like when she apologized to Symphony and explained that she had Kanan at a very young age, she described herself as pretty much being a baby with a baby. Everyone had input about what she was doing, and seemingly she was doing nothing right? Everything she was doing was wrong. And it's created this insecurity within her, like anyone trying to tell her what to do with Kanan, whether well-intentioned or what have you, she reacts very strongly to it. She pushes back against any advice from anyone else. But here it is that you see that Howard and Marvin at this point, they've kind of accepted to themselves, Marvin especially, that they don't know what they're doing as parents. And instead of doubling down on that and deciding that they're just going to soldier through, they welcome advice, they ask questions. Marvin realizes that he's made some mistakes and tries to figure out how to correct them, how to make them right. So it's like, if they're not seeking out outside advice and guidance, then they're not automatically dismissing it. We see that's not really the case here with RAQ. You know, her and Kanan are having issues with their mother and son relationship, and her solution is to kind of hold on to him more tightly, just for the two of them to go away to deal with each other one-on-one. And it goes back to this thing of her viewing it as it being the two of them against the world. Whereas with Marvin and Howard, you see that's not really the case. They're willing to accept outside help. RAQ and Kanan arrive up in the Catskills at the lodge. They check in, and apparently it seems RAQ is there under an assumed name because the lady checks her ID but reads the last name for confirmation as being, it sounded like Jones, while we know her last name is really Thomas. She buys a hunting knife that's on display while Kanan is kind of walking around the store looking at some of the items. He notices a white teenage girl, Hannah, who looks to be maybe about his age, and starts chatting her up. So we see RAQ looking over her shoulder at them, and she doesn't look too pleased, but at the same time, she doesn't say anything, at least not at that point. There's this ongoing thing of RAQ being trailed or followed and being seemingly oblivious. So here we have the Italians have followed them up to the Catskills, and she's unaware. Her and Kanan are sitting out by the campfire that night, eating hot dogs. She's, again, trying to make conversation while Kanan still not with it. He leaves the cabin with the excuse of going to get more soda from the lodge counter place, but really it's to spend time with Hannah. This now leaves RAQ at the cabin by herself, and the two mafia guys are watching from the cabin next door. Jimmy, the more level-headed of the two, decides to take advantage of the situation to try to kill RAQ. They have orders to leave Kanan unharmed, so he sends the other guy, who's openly racist and hostile, to keep an eye on Kanan. Back in the city while scoping out the house, the other guy was making all kinds of racist comments, right? But Jimmy's all about business. The other guy is super emotional and messy. I don't think his name is ever said. At the cabin by herself, RAQ is a bit on edge, and for good reason, as she hears Jimmy moving around, but tries to convince herself that it's Kanan. Fortunately, two other campers come in search of firewood, forcing Jimmy to fall back. RAQ goes in search of Kanan and arrives at the shop just in time to see the other mob guy yelling at Kanan and Hannah, who are on the verge of kissing. As RAQ and Kanan walk back to the cabin, she begins yelling at him about the dangers of him being a black boy with an interest in white girls. It's a night of close calls for both of them, right? To a degree that RAQ doesn't even know. RAQ clears the air and asks Kanan to join her for some s'mores. She drops some tidbits about High Post having been in the Boy Scouts, sharing some of the things he learned when he took them camping. So RAQ takes a swig from a bottle of liquor that she has in a brown bag. Very classy, and passes it to Kanan, giving him permission to drink some. She drops another tidbit, this time about her dad having been a bootlegger for a short amount of time. Kanan mentions this means he was a bootlegger, a prize fighter, and a jazz musician as well. RAQ mentions that he had a bunch of hustles, but never quite made enough money to satisfy their mom. RAQ actually sounds like she's kind of fond of her dad, right? Kanan has heard about him, but it's unclear if Kanan actually knew him. RAQ then segues into more serious topics, but they don't have the conversation that I expected, which would have been them addressing the tension between them. Instead, she asks him how he feels in general about their relationship as mother and son, as well as what she does. She explains to him that he's getting older, he's going to want to start making money, if he so chooses, that this thing that she's built, this criminal enterprise, is basically his for the taking if he wants it. But last season, she had the right idea in the sense of that she wanted better for Kanan, right? That what she was doing was bad enough, but that wasn't the life she wanted for him. She wanted him to leave the South Side and have a good, safe life. This here is terrible parenting. It gave me pause when she handed him the bottle of liquor for him to drink, and then her basically telling him if he wants to, he can be in her illegal business. Kanan explains that briefly for a period of time he didn't want any parts of it, but he thinks now that he does want to be involved. And this is to tell you, this is a kid, and his thought process is not all the way there. Look at all the mistakes that he made last season. You look at this now, it's like he's indecisive. He's back and forth. He's a kid trying to figure himself out, so under no circumstances should he be involved in this stuff. As the parent, it shouldn't be left up to Kanan whether or not he wants to be involved. On your end as the parent, you should make the decision for him that he's out of it. He's not involved at all along the lines of what you did early on last season of pushing him towards a better life. Because we see that RAQ doesn't really like this life that she's living. If she could get out of it, she probably would. right? Because it's not like she's living some great life. She doesn't enjoy it. She complains about it all the time. Why would you want that for your son? It's like, to appease Kanan and get him back on her side, she's choosing to be his friend rather than his parent. That won't end well. I really hate that they've taken this once complex character and simplified her in this way. You know, fine, you take your son on a getaway to Bond, invite him into your criminal business, and have him help you dispose of a body all in the same night. It's a terrible regression, and it makes the character unrealistic. It's kind of like a reversal, right? Or a shift in position with her and where Marvin stood last season. Marvin felt that their kids should have to work for everything like they did and not really receive any help or assistance. But we see that Jukebox made the conscious decision to not be a part of anything that Marvin is a part of. Whereas you saw that last season, RAQ did not want Kanan to be involved with her business at all. But now you have this reversal where it's like, instead of continuing to push Kanan towards a different life, she's now kind of resigned herself to accepting him into the fold, bringing him into this illegal business. So the next day, RAQ and Kanan are getting ready to leave. And as they're packing up their stuff, getting their bags out of the car and whatnot, she sends Kanan to the store to return the keys to the cabin, leaving herself alone at the cabin. On the way, Kanan runs across Hannah, who's cleaning an empty cabin, and the two step inside seemingly to make out and possibly more. The one guy that's kind of been like Kanan's babysitter, who has a problem with him and this girl being involved, sees what's going on and attacks Kanan. Meanwhile, Jimmy enters the cabin with the intent of killing RAQ, but it's seemingly empty. As he moves through the place, RAQ walks up behind him and places the knife that she'd purchased against his throat. She explains the situation to him, which is that she doesn't really want to kill him because that's going to cause real beef between her and Sal, the mob boss guy from Jersey. But if she leaves him alive, she then has to worry about him constantly trying to kill her. So RAQ believes that in time, she and Sal are going to work out some kind of a deal. But the conversation is cut short as Hannah runs in and explains that the other guy is attacking Kanan. RAQ, karate chops Jimmy or something, right, to stun him for a moment before running out of the cabin to save Kanan. This guy is always in some kind of problem. When they arrive at the other cabin, Kanan and old boy are fighting. RAQ has made a bit of a sacrifice because in leaving Jimmy alive and not really figuring out the situation, she's left herself open to the possibility that he'll come after her again in that moment, right? She's put Kanan's safety ahead of hers. When they arrive at the cabin, Jimmy shoots the other guy in, I think it's the leg, and Kanan is able to drop his gun when it drops. He's a bad shot, but could probably hit old boy at such close range. With that, RAQ and Jimmy, take the opportunity to call a truce for the time being. Nobody, including Hannah, is going to say anything about what happened. Kanan and RAQ get in the car and leave immediately. And so, RAQ has brought Kanan into the business, but they still haven't worked out the real issues between themselves. Instead, they've just added more dysfunction. I think Sal has some respect for the way RAQ handled herself during their meeting. And after her run-in with Jimmy, he might end up speaking to Sal on her behalf and become an asset to her. All might not be lost in Jersey, and if what I think happens, Worrell and possibly Unique might have problems on their hands. Marvin. The show opens with this one addict who is seemingly always popping up looking to score a fix. Every time this guy pops up, there's some kind of comedy or witty one-liner. So it's early in the morning, not a lot moving. Surprise, surprise, the crack house that is Baisley is shut down. So he's surprised, right? Marvin takes pity on him and emerges from one of the barricaded apartments in this garbage bag suit. When I saw that, I immediately started laughing. It's one of those little funny Marvin moments, right? With the rubber gloves and everything. Those moments just make the show that much better. So anyway, Marvin gives him a little something and sends him on his way. Tells him that they're shut down until later in the day. As I figured when I saw Marvin in the outfit, I assumed that he was getting ready to move the building inspector because that smell seems like it's getting ridiculous. Marvin goes, he takes him out of the wall, he's skeletonized at this point, and so he wraps him up in garbage bags, which is just gross, right? I did not for the life of me understand. I knew this was going to come back when I saw Marvin put him in the wall last season. I couldn't understand why Marvin thought to close this guy up in the wall because it's going to stink. You're going to have to get rid of him. You can't just leave him there. And so it was just one of those things that you knew eventually was going to come back. So we see later on Marvin is, he drops off the body to RAQ and whatnot. So we see Marvin is having breakfast with the lady from the anger management class. For whatever reason, I don't know why, she couldn't just ask him to either stay after class or to come in a little bit early. But pretty much they're meeting up because he's going to the sessions, but he's still not really participating in them. So she uses this as an opportunity to really stress the point that as part of his plea deal, he has to participate in the class. Apparently, it sounds like she has to give reports to the judge, and if he's not actually doing the work, he's not going to get out of the program what he's supposed to. And so she continues to push him, asks him, to share something about himself that she doesn't know, that makes him vulnerable. It's like, maybe if he's not willing to do it in the group, with them being there one-on-one, he might be willing to open up. So it's like, she sure is taking an interest in brother Marvin. And so with that, he doesn't go into detail about the situation, but he mentions, Jukebox and him having made some mistakes, not being a great dad, and, done something that she might find unforgivable, which he understands. And it sounds like he has some regrets. I honestly thought from the first episode when it was said that Tony had moved, like she skipped town, and I think later Marvin saw something about her, like a wedding announcement or an engagement announcement, something like that, right? That she was marrying a dentist up in Scarsdale. I thought that was just the end of her story, right? That she was written off the show. But we see here that Marvin is actually parked up in Scarsdale, and he's scoping out a store where she's shopping. He's sitting parked at the curb, and it attracts the attention of a police officer who realizes that he's a new face and is sitting and watching rather than shopping. Probably doesn't help that he's black in what's likely a predominantly white town, right? I feel no good is going to come from this, right? So apparently I thought they ended some of these storylines from the first season, but we see in this episode alone that quite a few come into play here. It's seemingly the next day, and Marvin is still up in Scarsdale following Tony around. He rolls by her house and sees her carrying on with her husband, and while he's creeping by and spying on Tony, the officer in the cruiser is also scoping him out. We'll see what comes of that. Jukebox. We see a later scene where Zisa is leaving her house and she steps outside and Jukebox is there waiting. Jukebox heard the song on the tape that Crown passed her last episode, and Zisa is singing that Bruise song that she created. Juke shows up thinking that Zisa has stolen the song from her, but as it turns out, she didn't know that Jukebox had anything to do with the song. The song was given to her by Lou and she performed it. It's kind of a betrayal if you think about it, right? That you take her song, which is bad enough, but you take it and give it to another artist and say nothing to her about it. And this is Lou, her uncle, and she found out about it from Crown, who was admittedly being messy. So Jukebox goes to confront Lou about him giving the song to Zisa, and he explains that he gave her the song to see what she would do with it, and she did a great job. But it points back to this thing of he felt it was a beautiful song, but that it wasn't a song for Jukebox, and it was better suited for Zisa. But that's Jukebox's song. At the very least, before offering it to Zisa, you should have spoken to her about it, right? To make sure that she's cool with it, because it's not just a business thing. Like, this is your niece as well, right? It's her song. It's what she created. Honestly, this person shouldn't be recording it if you don't have her blessing, because it's not just like a song that you created and gave to her. She wrote the lyrics for it. She made the song what it is. And so it kind of goes back to this thing about them and the issues that they have with Jukebox's image, which she points out when he explains that it's a beautiful song and he gave it to Zisa and she knocked it out of the park, right? Because it's better suited for her, which Jukebox interprets, and I think rightly so, that the song is beautiful and Jukebox isn't beautiful enough for it. That's not me saying that, right? I think Jukebox is beautiful, but it goes back to the conversation that they had previously about Jukebox's appearance. So it's like, look at how much this girl has been sacrificing, right? Just to get put on. That her uncle has a record label, or back at that time, he wasn't with the label, but he had a relationship with the label owner, someone that had a studio. And here it is that she was boosting clothes to get into the studio, right? He's not really helping Jukebox, but he's helping other people to her music. It's like, it's just dead wrong. So we see Jukebox is spending time with Kenya, who is in a choir, right? Jukebox is sitting in the pews. She's dressed quite differently than she normally is. She's let her hair down. She looks more feminine in comparison to how she usually dresses. Pretty much by the end of the first season, Jukebox is out to the Thomas side of her family. It's unclear what prompted this, Jukebox to change her clothes here, right? Last season, it was about her sexual orientation, but this season it's more about her image and her presentation. So you have Lulu and Crown really telling her that she has the talent, but doesn't have the look. And then here we see it now with her and her mom, where we haven't heard this conversation from the mom or any prompting from the mom, but within this church environment and in being around the mom and wanting to build this relationship with her mom, we see again that Jukebox is kind of changing her image to be more feminine, right? Kind of hiding her identity. Somehow she's gotten the sense, whether told directly or just implied, that her image really isn't going to work in this environment or isn't going to work with her mom. My concern is that Marvin was a problem last season and that he was so distant and uninvolved with everything going on with Jukebox that he was the last one to pick up on her sexual orientation. And when he did, it turned into this really terrible situation. He had a terrible reaction to it. And we see now that he's trying to make amends. He's trying to be more tolerant and understanding of it. And so I can't help but wonder what this is going to do for Jukebox and her mother's relationship, in that she feels, at least initially, this need to hide herself. How is that going to work in the long run? My feeling is that Jukebox is going to build her hopes up, and when she does reveal herself to her mom, like her true self, then she might be rejected, which would be terrible, but very possible. We see here, like within the family, within the Thomases, Kanan and RAQ support and have always supported Jukebox in her talent. Lou to a degree, but he's becoming increasingly problematic since his involvement with Bulletproof Records. And Marvin seems dead set against it, or he seemed dead set against it originally, though it seems like he's kind of coming around. But here we see that from the very onset, Kenya takes pride in and is very proud of Jukebox's singing abilities, in the sense that there's a degree of acceptance from her mother. We see her from the very outset. Kenya takes pride in and is very proud of Jukebox's singing abilities, right? There's some degree of acceptance from her mother, whereas previously there was some degree of rejection from Marvin. We did see that going back to the first season when Jukebox performed with Famous at the showcase, that Marvin was actually quite proud. He was in the crowd yelling out that that was his kid, right? That was his daughter. He was very proud of her. And then we see, I think it's in the last episode, where him and Lou were in the car and he kind of teared up a little bit listening to Jukebox's song, right? Recognizing her talent, but much of this is unknown to Jukebox. Lou. There's been this back and forth with Crown and Lou, right? Even going back to last season. And we see here that pretty much Crown is willing to take money from Lou, but doesn't really want him to be involved in the music side of things. So we've seen him doing little passive-aggressive things, but Lou's handling of the situation as well is problematic. He and Crown are meeting with what appears to be like a radio DJ. They're trying to get Ziza's song on the radio. And so Lee starts to interject, talking about Ziza, really bigging her up and whatnot, and Crown shuts him down. Lou, shuts him down and explains that he's the money man, but sometimes he likes to get involved in the music stuff, really just patronizing him. And so Crown and the radio guy leave Lou in the room and step outside to talk business, right? It pretty much sounds like a pay-for-play kind of thing, like payola. The guy's asking for money in exchange for playing the records. And so when they step out into the hall, they begin poking fun at Lou, right? Him being delusional about his involvement and whatnot. And so when Lou and Crown leave, Lou actually punches Crown in the mouth, like busting his lip in the process. This is that scene that we see in the preview of Crown with the busted lip, putting his hand on the gun and whatnot. He tells Lou that he's getting tired of him putting his hands on him. This is at least the second time he's put his hands on Crown. And so, Lou trying to get his way is like trying to strong arm and be very aggressive with Crown, at times being violent with him. Whereas Crown, in trying to combat that, is passive aggressive. The woman that Howard is seeing doesn't have much info to give up, right? But she has been pulled in by Burke and is explaining that, Howard thought he was going to die. He made the decision that he wants to clean up his life, get his act together and whatnot. Part of that is that he wants to be a better person for himself and his son. The mention of the son catches Burke's interest, right? Although the lady mentions that he hasn't told her much about this kid, not even his name. All she knows is he's a teen and Howard just found out about him. So I think Burke is going to figure out that Howard isn't just taking a special interest in Kanan and RAQ for no reason. That can create some issues for Howard and possibly Kanan if she finds out that he's the one who shot Howard. It can create complex problems for RAQ as she's been trying to keep this secret of Kanan's true paternity for all these years, and also her sending Kanan to kill Howard. I think that Burke might be putting herself in the line of fire, right? And it leads to the unfortunate situation of Howard breaking up with his girlfriend of 7 years. Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my Rolling with RAQ playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.